Oh, strong indeed as the world weakens with each new breath and each new day. We're here with JB and with Kirk. How are you fellows this evening?
Good evening. Good, thank you.
Doing good.
Are we practicing social distancing? Are we corona-free?
Well, I'm not wearing my mask. I'm just telling you. It's hard to talk to it. So.
I got a job that makes me go in. They're giving me free access to coronavirus every day.
Wow. You heard that the Corona Brewing Company has offered a $10 million donation to the U.S. Trademark and Patent Office if they'll rebrand the coronavirus Bud Light.
I thought it was.
I like it.
Good thinking.
Back to reality. I was going to share a news article last week, but I'll share it this week. A reporter that used to work for the New York Times, he couldn't publish this if he still worked for the New York Times, but he's been surveying the life in America as it has upended the United States due to the coronavirus with a massive of business closures, plunging the country into what he calls free fall. He is sounding the alarm about what he believes to be flawed models dictating the aggressive strategy. His name is Alan Berenson. He has been analyzing the data on the crisis on a daily basis for weeks now and has come to the conclusion that the strategy of shutting down entire sectors of the economy is based on modeling that does not line up with realities. Isn't that interesting? Of course, last week what I reported to you was that I did a study of the 12 states that were still open and free and compared them to the 38 states that were locked down and not free. And what I found is that you are nearly 10 times safer if you live free than if your rights are deprived. That not only has the lockdown not produced any value in saving lives, it has actually made people vastly more susceptible to getting the virus and to dying from it. And therefore, what this reporter is saying is actually inadequate. He went on to report that the response that we have taken thus far has caused enormous societal devastation. And he says, I don't think that's too strong a word. Brenson is a former reporter, as I shared, from the New York Times, and that he was in charge of covering the pharmaceutical industry for the newspaper. What he's claiming is simple. The models guiding the response are wrong, and that it's becoming clearer by the day. One of the ultimate weasels in the country is Dr. Fauci, the little twerp that Donald Trump brings up to the podium to speak about the virus. And he was the one that said, you know, it could be 200,000 Americans that die of this, and therefore we have to impose these mitigation efforts. He was the one that originally proposed the idea that we had to flatten the curve so that we would have enough ventilators and hospital beds. Well, as we sit now, hospitals are empty. We have a surplus of ventilators, and that the disease did not do anything close to what he was claiming. And now, even though all of those models had all of the lockdowns already built into them, he's saying that it's his strategy that has caused the positive results and the deviation from the models, not the fact that he shut down the country or advised the president to shut down the country based on completely flawed models, and that he is a nincompoop. Normally, I wouldn't be that aggressive against a little twerp like Dr. Fauci, but one of the things that I learned is that this virus was synthesized in a Chinese lab, and that the funding for that lab and two tranches, both tranches over $3 million, came from the National Institutes of Health, and one of them bears Dr. Fauci's signature. And he knew what they were doing was reprehensible because he was part of the Obama administration's ban on the development and testing analysis that is being done on these novel coronaviruses because of the ultimate risk that the virus would get out and do exactly what it's doing to the world. And so he was part of that ban, and yet he funded the research in China that was taking it to an extreme. I'll finish this article and then share with you what I have learned, but I am no fan of the doctor. In February, he said, I was worried about the virus. By mid-March, I was more scared about the economy. By now, I'm starting to be genuinely nervous, he tweeted. It isn't that complicated. The models don't work. The hospitals are empty. Why are we talking about indefinite lockdowns? Well, the fact of the matter is that a week ago, I told you that the hospitals have never had such occupancy rates. They are, in fact, empty. Many of the excess hospitals we have built, and, for example, Washington State by the Army Corps of Engineers that everyone was shouting about, and McCormick Place, the largest trade center in the United States, haven't even been used. Everything we did was based on a flaw. And even the ventilators has been a hoax because this disease does not kill by infecting the lungs. It kills by destroying the body's immune system. It is a blood-borne virus, and it's the toxicity, the septic nature of the blood that is shutting down organs no matter how long or short a period of time someone is being put on a ventilator. He initially challenged the model put forward by the Imperial College in London. You recall them. They were the ones that said they would see 500,000 people killed by the disease in the UK alone, and then said, oops, maybe we made a mistake after the UK used that model to shut their country down, and said, maybe I should have said 20,000. It is stunning.
The one.
I'm off by a factor of 30, but, you know, what the heck? Let's go ahead and shut down the UK government. It's going to contract this year at 7%, depression level numbers.
Mm-hmm.
All based upon flawed modeling. Now, the modeling is flawed for lots of reasons. One of the reasons is the Communist Party of China has deliberately misled the world, and the World Health Organization has aided and abetted their misleading the world so that we are making stupid decisions. And part of that is there have been two countries that stand out among all others that say this is the way you deal with this virus, and no one wants to pay any attention to them. It's been a rush of U.S. governors and a rush of heads of state around the world to outdo the other and to see who can put their country in greater lockdown or more universal lockdown. And yet the effects are negligible. And when you compare them to the two countries that didn't shut down anything, you should just want to cry. And the fact is that we should have been following Taiwan, and if not Taiwan, South Korea, and we'll speak again to that in a moment. This reporter says that the models have social distancing and other measures backed into them, even though Dr. Anthony Fauci said that the indicators are that social distancing efforts are working. Because remember, what do you do with data will always outstrip a model. You redo your models depending on your data. Our data is telling us that mitigation is working. No, your models are telling you that you're an idiot, that you shut down the economy and gained nothing in the process. I mean, the reality is now that we're here and that we have shut down the economy, caused catastrophic damage worldwide, the residue of shutting down the economies is going to cause 10 times the deaths that this disease ever could. That as we open up the economy, what's going to happen is that the infection rate is going to rise because we did nothing to mitigate it. That's the reality. And so there's only two ways to resolve a virus like this. One is for the virus to die out. This one was manufactured not to die out. It isn't going to die out, or enough people become immune to it for having had it that the virus can't find a suitable number of hosts.
Yeah.
Those are the only two ways. Yes, there's talk of a vaccine, but the only people that are really close appear to be the Chinese, and they're only close because they knew about this when they were covering up months before it happened. And listen, I am hugely pro-vaccine. I wouldn't take a Chinese vaccine if it was the last option on earth. The Israelis are developing a vaccine, but they're 3 months away from even beginning to test it. And by the time they start testing it to the time that they can actually say this is safe, is another 6 months or more. And even then, to roll out a mass production of vaccines with just 6 months testing with a virus that is mutating rapidly is probably insane.
Too much, too little, too late. Yeah.
Especially in America, where the anti-vaccination crowd is so large compared to other countries.
Yes, I mean the reality that so many people are into conspiracies and are anti-vaccine is a real problem. Although I would tell you that on a disease that was manufactured, that was synthesized, one should have some concern over a vaccine. And on a disease that is showing indications that antibodies won't stop it. Those who have been sick are able to contract the virus again. The only way vaccines work is they build up antibodies. And if the antibodies don't work, there's a lot of viruses where the antibodies for the virus have a very short life, a matter of weeks. This could be one of them.
That's why there's no vaccine for the flu. It changes every year. You can get a flu shot, but it doesn't, whether you're going to get one of the, 100 strands that it covers, when there's 500 other strands out there.
Yes. And that's one problem with the virus is it's constantly mutating, so that a vaccine that is created 9 months ago is for a virus that existed 12 months ago and has very little to do with the virus as it currently exists. But the fact that this appears to not be responsive to antibodies is a problem of an entirely different scope. This particular journalist says that aside from New York, nationally, there has been no health system in crisis. In fact, to be truly correct, there has been a health system crisis only in the sense that the hospitals are empty. Cuomo, who has had the best press conferences, did a tizzy fit, childish meltdown. I don't know if it was yesterday or first thing this morning, when he blamed Trump, and he says, we're only in this mess because we built all these extra healthcare facilities based on his numbers. No, they weren't his numbers. The world created numbers, and everybody had the opportunity to look at various different models. To blame Trump for those models is scapegoating Governor Cuomo. And then he said, we had some excuse over ventilators, even though there's more ventilators than you could possibly need. And then he's saying that he's begging the federal government for bailout money because New York is so far in debt and was terribly in debt even before this virus hit. It is particularly sad.
Yes.
But this guy said, listen, this is true in Florida where the lockdown was late. It's true in South Carolina where the lockdown was early. It's true in Oklahoma where there was no state lockdown. There isn't any correlation between the lockdowns and whether or not the epidemic spread wide or fast. He says he blames the models for a response that has effectively shut down large sectors of the economy and is causing significant financial harm to Americans. 6.6 million unemployment claims per week. Trump has spoken about the fact that the cure is worse than the problem. there was incredible pressure to do something, and that's one of the great problems in our world today is people are all clamoring for doing something. In fact, 70% of Americans are blaming Trump for acting too late because, well, you had to do something. Well, very often doing something is worse than doing nothing. For example, invading Afghanistan and Iraq after 9/11, that was doing something. Well, it cost us $6 trillion and left 1 million people dead, and it made two very bad situations much worse. After Pearl Harbor, Americans clamored to do something, so we went to war against the Japanese, and for the 3,000 American service personnel that were killed at Pearl Harbor, we sacrificed another 300,000 and ended the war by burning 50 to 100,000 Japanese civilians each night alive. Sometimes doing something is far worse than doing nothing. In the case of this virus, doing just reasonable things, encouraging people to wear masks, to engage in better hygiene, wash their hands, would have gone a long way, as would have following Yahweh's advice of isolating those who are sick. In fact, if we had just followed Yahweh's advice, we would be in a situation where this would be very similar to an average year's flu. No one, according to this person, stopped and said, what about Japan? Well, Japan wasn't the answer. The answer was South Korea and Taiwan. He says, now we're in a bad spot because there's clearly a dangerous political dynamic now. The economy is in free fall and a lot of people are hurting. If we acknowledge that this is clearly happening, the people who made these decisions, they're going to cause a lot of people to be angry with them. So they don't want to acknowledge it, so they're going to say that the lockdown is what saved us. Well, as I said, of those 12 free states, you are 6 times likely to avoid being infected by the virus in those 6 free states, and you're 11 times less likely to die from the virus in those 12 free states. But that's nothing compared to the 2 countries that we spoke of, South Korea and Taiwan. If you compare South Korea and Taiwan to the world at large, where the countries that are best known for their lockdowns have 19 times higher infection rates and 60 times more mortality from the coronavirus than do South Korea and Taiwan. So if you compare the likes of Spain, Ireland, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Iceland, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, France, the UK, Portugal, Australia, the total lockdown crew with Taiwan and South Korea, you're 19 times more likely to be infected in the countries with complete lockdowns and 60 times more likely to die. That's why the things that we ought to be doing is looking at the percentages of the population who are infected, not just the overall numbers.
But that's scary.
I shared last week
ratings on the news channels. If we throw out big, scary numbers, that gets people to tune in and watch us every night.
Oh, yeah. Well, the New York Times did an article talking about how the United States is the worst country in the world because of the 600,000 people that are infected in the United States, far more than any other country. But what they didn't look at is the percentage of Americans that were infected versus the percentage of people in countries like Spain and Italy and France and others. And so the New York Times wasn't smart enough to know how to play with numbers. Speaking of numbers, I shared this last week, but it's just so staggering. 15% of Democratic college students said that Trump should be blamed more for the coronavirus than should the Chinese Communist government. Just 15. said that the Chinese government, if I said that incorrectly, just 15% of Democratic college students said that the Chinese government should be blamed more than Donald Trump for the coronavirus infection. It shows me that 85% of Democratic college students are absolutely stupid. I don't know why they're in college.
Brainwashed.
Yes, they're wasting their time. A Jewish fellow, his name is Yaman, led a team of researchers from Bengal's Artificial Intelligence Lab, and they, along with representatives from, I guess he's still the prime minister. They're going to go to the fourth election now in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Defense Ministry and Israeli Air Force technology units have been working together to create an exit strategy model for Israel. Their conclusion? This plays right up your alley, JB. Open daycare. Let children return to their normal lives. Let them go back to school. That's when they ran all the numbers through supercomputers. That's what it said. It says that actually has the best results. It says most households that have children under the age of 6, in particular, are not likely to have elderly people at the age of 60. He says such children can go back to school and infect each other in very mild or asymptomatic ways, and then some of them will infect members of their household who are also low-risk cases. Slowly, the parents will infect their friends and colleagues, and ultimately society at large will have herd immunity to the virus. He said that
like when we were kids and one kid would get the chicken pox and everyone would get together and parents would get all those kids together so they'd all get chicken pox.
That's correct. Just get it over at one time.
And then we all built an immunity to it.
Right, rather than suffering from it for a year or more. He said the country would not have more than 5,000 ventilated patients under that model, and Israel's medical system would not collapse. It is herd mentality. So the question is herd mentality or herd immunity better than social distancing? The quote was, "We won't be able to isolate ourselves forever," end quote. That's my point. At some stage, we have to resume a regular routine. Then, if we don't have herd immunity, people will start being infected again. Until we do have this immunity, he said, effectively, we are delaying the inevitable. That was the thrust of the news portion of this last show. By these deprivations of freedoms and the shuttering of business, we're not only destroying the only thing that can actually work in our favor and keeping the world from utter and complete collapse and total collectivization, communism, that all we're doing is delaying the inevitable. The public needs to understand that these measures of social distancing mean that we'll find ourselves with corona for a longer period of time, even for years or more. Gaynor said, by the lockup, they are slowing down herd immunity. If we don't let the virus spread quickly through the population, then the population is not getting immune. And if that is true, every day that we slow it down is an economic crisis that is growing larger and longer. There are only two ways of seeing a plague like this coming to an end: extinction of the virus or herd immunity. With this virus, based upon its cousin viruses, there will be no extinction. So the only path back to normal life is by letting this herd immunity develop, letting nature do its thing, is the result of the analysis through the supercomputers in Israel.
The analogy I use is the Great Depression. Had the government not tried to artificially prop up the economy, the Great Depression would have been short-lived. We'd have bounced back and continued on. but they tried to artificially prop it up to keep it from hitting rock bottom and extended it for, a decade. And that's what we're doing. We're not stopping it. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, whether it happens in the next 6 months to a year or it happens in the next 2 to 3 years. It's inevitable.
Yeah. The fact is, people die. Something did happen amazing this week. It's called the Worldometer. You can look it up online. In fact, if you Google coronavirus stats by state, the first thing that comes up on Google is Worldometer. And if you go to Worldometer's homepage, they have a population meter. And I was watching it, so I was, and Jackie was doing editing, so I sent it to her. And together we watched, I actually took a video of it. The world, I think it was 2 days ago, we marked down the time circa the date on Yahweh's calendar in Jerusalem time. And the world reached 7,777,777 individuals.
Wow.
This week. And when you look at the number of people that have died this week, died since the beginning of the year, it was like, in the range of 15 million. I mean, the coronavirus at 150,000 is just an insignificant number. And I realize that when someone says that, they're saying, well, you're so cold-hearted person. What if that person died? Listen, death is inevitable.
Reality.
We're all going to die. The people that are most susceptible to this are those people who are on a short leash anyway. But since there is nothing we can do now that the virus is among us to put it back into that lab, you have to think through, as that computer research did, what is the best possible outcome? There are no good choices here. There's no magic wand. You can't keep everybody alive, and you can't keep the environment shuttered. Governments are net parasites. They don't create anything of value. It's business that creates everything of value. And people don't appreciate business, and they don't understand that it is impossible to keep, for government to say, this is an essential business and you can stay open, but these things are not. If you close down schools, for example, then parents can't go to work if their business is essential or not. And if you say that the supermarket is essential, the farmer is essential, then what about the guy supplying the maintenance for the tractors? What about the companies supplying the fuel for them? What about the companies that make the fertilizers or that prepare the seeds? All the companies involved in transportation, or all the support for those companies? Or where are the truck drivers going to eat? The company that makes the rubber,
that the tires for the truck drivers.
Correct. Right.
Just simple boxes.
And then the boxes that everything like this is made in. And the companies that create the electricity so the factories can stay open. It just goes on and on and on, and it's all interwoven together, and that's the way a free enterprise system works. And that's the reason why communist economies have always failed. And so,
it's funny. I'm teaching Jalen this. We found a great child's book. It's called "No One Knows How to Make a Pizza," and it just goes into a handful of the different things that are required for a cheese pizza to be made. The farmer growing the wheat that gets turned into the flour, the trucker delivering it, and it gets into all that in a very childlike way. But I'm like, my daughter's understanding
all the
this
people
stuff
that
at
support
4
that
years
farmer.
old.
Right.
Yeah.
All the
it
people
talks about that. It's a great book for teaching this to a kid. My 4-year-old understands this better than the people running our country. How bad is that?
It's a small story, but I just want to show you that the communist government of China is not the only nincompoops in charge of countries. There was a collision at sea this past week. So in the Caribbean Sea, not far from where I am here, a passenger ship, which was empty because they're all empty right now, was doing some maintenance on their engines. So they were just kind of drifting as they were doing their maintenance. And a Venezuelan military vessel, the Resolute, started firing at them. It's just drifting. It's a passenger ship. There's nothing on it but crew. And they decided, well, we'll fire at them. And then when that didn't work, they rammed them. And when they rammed them, this ship happened to have a super strong hull because it does cruises in the Arctic. Mm-hmm. And sunk the Resolute.
Good for them.
And so when the Resolute sunk, and the Resolute, the cruise ship stayed around and picked up the 144 crew on the off of the Resolute, who are now bobbing up and down in the water, and yet the Venezuelan Minister of Defense said that it was a cowardly act and criminal manner where the cruise ship fled the collision site, and it was a typical example of a colonialist power trying to influence their country.
You shot at them.
We shot at them and you rammed them.
And you're complaining because I ran away?
Oh. Yeah, in fact, his term was, it was an act of imperial aggression and piracy. Yeah, they were the ones that were shot at, and they were the ones that were rammed, and they stayed around without their engines running and picked up your drowning sailors.
So they can get closer to shooting me.
This story is out of the IMF. It says the coronavirus pandemic will turn global economic growth sharply negative. That's the difference between a recession and a depression. This is from the International Monetary Fund. It says that the world is facing the greatest economic crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. She forecast that 2021 would still not see a recovery. Lockdowns have been imposed and have forced companies. JB, it's okay to have her talk, but you probably got to mute your phone when she does. Lockdowns imposed by governments have forced many companies to close and lay off staff. And she says that at this point, 4 out of every 5 jobs has been lost to the coronavirus. Just 3 months ago, we were expecting positive per capita income growth in over 160 countries. Today, that number has been turned on its head, and we project that over 170 countries will actually contract and have negative per capita income growth. Negative means they will be in a depression. Mm-hmm. Here's some insights from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It is managed by the China Academy of the Sciences. The Wuhan Institute of Virology is a joint project between the French and the Chinese. The French aren't entirely to blame, though. They had an architect that completed plans for the center that would have made it less accident susceptible. But the Communist Party of China, and by the way, there's 3 different ways to render this: the CCP, the PC, and the PCC. It all talks about the same thing. It's the Chinese Communist Party. They switched the design to a military construction firm and put it under the Military Management Office.
Okay.
Director Wan Ziming under Zhang Manheng and Chen Zhu, who is the eldest son of Jiang Zemin, the former prime minister of China, are the largest shareholders. See, in a communist government, all you do is you switch one group of royalty for another. They also are the largest shareholders of Wuxi Aptech and control all of China's medical research and control China's largest pharmaceutical company. The United States sent free to China right after the virus broke out large quantities of remdesivir. Have you heard of remdesivir?
No, I have not.
Okay. They send large quantities of remdesivir. Remdesivir was developed to fight Ebola, creating a synthetic coronavirus. Now, what happened once the U.S. sent it free to the Chinese? It's from an interesting company. We'll talk about that company in a moment.
Okay.
The same group of cronies that control the Chinese medical research and their largest pharmaceutical company filed for a patent for remdesivir back in January to treat the coronavirus. Talk about scum. Talk about scum. There have been a number of scientific research papers. I have now read them, where those working in the lab in China, particularly Shi Zhengli is likely dead. She's gone missing. It's likely dead. Is in a number of research papers that have been published throughout the world, some in leading periodicals, that use the word synthesized as it relates to this particular coronavirus. They were synthesizing coronaviruses for human hosts. My son's has a PhD in medicinal chemistry. His research was on synthesizing a mechanism to target the hypoxic nature of a cancer tumor, because the blood vessels in a cancer tumor are, with the rapid growth of that tumor, are constrained, and they send less blood to the tumor, which means it's hypoxic. It gets less oxygen. So he synthesized two things. One is an extract of willow bark from an African willow that had this unique propensity to target hypoxic environments. And so it would carry something, in this case it would carry a anti-cancer drug directly to the heart of the cancer cell, because it targeted the hypoxic nature of that cell. And then he synthesized a trigger that would only release the poison, which is how you kill cancer, the poison inside of the cell. So the poison would not be released until it was in the hypoxic core. Both of those things he synthesized from natural elements. And then they were designed to carry chemo kinds of drugs right into the heart of the cell, so that it was the cancer cell itself that was being destroyed from the inside, not destroying the rest of the good cells in the body. So his whole research was in synthesizing these products. Well, the research from the Wuhan Institute of Virology was all on synthesizing a unique blend of corona and other viruses for human hosts. What we have found is that they took viruses from bats that had HIV, viruses from bats that had Ebola, viruses from bats that had a very deadly strain of corona. And they put those things together, literally spliced together in that lab. That was their research. And they had gotten U.S. funding for now doing this research not only with the bats, but in dogs and in rats and in other animals. And they would actually put probes in the rats' brains, so that when they forced large amounts of their virus into the rats and then subjected the rats to all sorts of tests, they could see how the virus affected the rat's performance, to see what effect it would have on controlling a mammal. That was the research. Now, there's only 3 reasons that you would do that sort of thing. One is that it's a military-designed weapon, that you're going to militarize it.
Yeah.
The second is monetary, that you're going to develop a vaccine and spread this around the world, and people will pay any amount of money for your vaccine, or you're just an absolute psychopath. Those are the only three reasons. And you have to be a psychopath because you're torturing animals and you're playing life and death with the human race.
Yeah.
And the Communist Party, the People's Daily, declared that this was last year in May, that there is a people's war. That is the Communist Party's Daily, their spokes rag, said there is a people's war against the United States. Xi Jinping is, in her research, said that the virus is 96% similar to bat-related coronaviruses, and that they were actually splicing from in their lab. But then when the virus got out, which is an accident, this is like the fourth or fifth accident in this facility, it infected the staff in the facility. The first 3 infected individuals had no contact whatsoever with the Wuhan seafood market. None. The Wuhan seafood market had never sold bats. Moreover, the nearest bat with any of the viruses carried in this coronavirus were almost 1,000 miles away. But what the Chinese government did after the first 3 individuals were found to have no contact whatsoever with the Wuhan seafood market, and of the first 90 infected individuals, 40 had no contact with the seafood market. The Chinese Communist Party ordered the destruction of all evidence, that all virus samples would be destroyed, and all people would be criminated, and that the lab itself would be shut down and completely sanitized, and they shut down and sanitized the market, and they destroyed all evidence. And even the people running the crematorium of those first victims died or have disappeared. Then the Communist Party of China has established protocols saying that there were 3 conditions which had to be met for research on the virus. The first was that they mandated that only virus samples of those who had contact with the Wuhan seafood market could be considered as subjects. Well, you know, if you only have access to the virus from those who were in the market, who were, by the way, contaminated with the subjects, the researchers in the lab, then what are you going to find?
What are you going to find there? Yeah.
Yes.
One sample group. That's your sample group. That's it.
On January 2nd, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was told there could be no distribution nor any disclosure of any information or any publication released from the Institute, January 2nd. They were still allowing Chinese to travel around the world, just not throughout China. On January 21, remdesivir was patented by the Institute, even though it was provided free from China to the to China from the United States. Yeah. On January 23rd, Wuhan was locked down, but only locked down from the rest of China, with the World Health Organization and the Chinese working together to put out, you can read their releases. They said there's no indication of human-to-human contact with this virus, and that, you know, the Chinese government is certain that they have it under control, and that with China locked down and the Wuhan area closed off to travel in China, they still encouraged Wuhan residents to travel around the world. And it was in early January that the first Americans were infected with the virus out of China, the first Italians, the first French, the first Spanish. The World Health Organization and the Chinese government worked together to spare the rest of China and to infect the rest of the world. On the 3rd of February, Dr. Wu Xinghua said that actually wrote that Shi Zhengli's haphazard lab procedures and management were likely the cause of the virus and caused it to escape from the lab. He was the general manager of the facility, and he wrote that the woman, Shi Zhengli, haphazard lab procedures and management were the cause of the virus escaping from the lab. On February 4th, chairman of the facility, Zhu Bo, wrote that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was suspected of manufacturing and leaking the Wuhan virus. Chen Wei, the biochemical expert of the People's Liberation Army in China, officially took control over the Wuhan Institute of Virology P4 lab on the 7th of February. On 2/14, the Communist Party of China leader Xi Jinping called for the inclusion of biosecurity into China's national security framework. China state media began to officially refute, then spread rumors on Chinese media that the female graduate student was patient zero and that she had perished. Wan's photo, her resume and thesis were instantly removed from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, leaving only her name. On the 17th of February, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, Shen Jingchao, wrote that the Director General of the Institute, Wang Zi, was suspected of leaking the virus. It was created, it was synthesized in the lab, taken from bats that had HIV, Ebola. That's why remdesivir works, because of the Ebola component. HIV, that's why people are not dying of lung infections. They're dying because their blood becomes septic, because it triggers all sorts of failures of the immune system. We shouldn't have made the emphasis on ventilators, but had China been forthright in information, we would have focused on anything that can help cleanse the blood. The only thing so far that is tested universally positive is the drug that was made to combat Ebola. Tells you a lot, doesn't it?
Boy, I guess. Boy, what a...
CNN reported this week that China has imposed restrictions on the publication of academic research on the origins of the novel coronavirus, according to a central government directive, an online notice published by the Chinese universities. Once CNN called the Chinese representatives on the number that was provided at the bottom of their notification, restricting all publication and research on the novel coronavirus, they removed the notices from those sites. Under the new policy, all academic papers on COVID-19 were subject to vetting by the Communist Party. Medical experts in Hong Kong who collaborated with the researchers to publish critical papers say that this was an intentional move for them to be able to control information as it comes out of China. The latest effort by the Chinese government to control the narrative on the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. Isn't that sick? The largest totalitarian government in the world has become not only the most deadly and caustic for its own people, but it has created a virus that has caused the world to reflect itself. The country that doesn't allow any personal freedoms, that spies on everyone within the country, that has the largest concentration camps of any country in the world, that doesn't allow its citizens to have internet access, that is killing people for just doing nothing other than questioning the government, where anyone that speaks out against the government disappears and never reappears again. That country created a virus and disseminated it around the world that has caused the world to become just like it. Deprived of freedom, with governments controlling all businesses. They did, in one instance, what will turn out to be $10 trillion of damage to the free world. Ought to take your breath away.
It does.
I want to share one more news item, and then we'll go to back to Torah. I'm thinking about doing because there's so much to share about this. I think people are interested in the family on hearing about it, because the first thing to die with the coronavirus wave across the world was truth. Getting accurate information became almost impossible. Well, here's a news flash. The Federal Reserve is now buying $600 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds, corporate bonds, and municipal bonds every week. That's $2.5 trillion per month. The Federal Reserve is buying $2.5 trillion a month of Treasury bonds, corporate bonds, and municipal bonds. At that rate, the Federal Reserve will own all outstanding U.S. public debt, all U.S. outstanding federal and local debt. And it could happen by as early as September or October of this year. It will own all U.S. private and corporate debt by December. The Fed issued a new fund to buy U.S. mortgage assets from banks, pledging $200 billion per month. The U.S. Federal Reserve is now officially the largest landowner in the world. We are now owned by the Federal Reserve. And of course, the Federal Reserve didn't have any money. It's not like the operatives of the Federal Reserve had their own money and said, "Hell, let's help out. We'll loan the world money." No. What they do is they increase the money supply, which devalues the value of assets for every American. So they inflate the money supply, and they use the money they created by destroying the value of the U.S. currency to buy these bonds. And then they charge interest on the money that they created by destroying the currency.
What a gig.
Oh, God. I mean, folks, it ought to make you very, very, very concerned. Now, we have not spent a lot of time in the past covering the news. I did this 5 days a week, 3 hours a day for Shattering Myth for years, and I culled through the news, and I pulled articles, and I shared with listeners what the real agenda was, what was actually happening, where the government or the military or the religious institution was misleading people, and did that for years. I don't know, 5, 6 years of those programs. This program has been devoted to the Torah. But something fundamentally changed. Our world is never going back to what it was. It's not the coronavirus, it's the world's reaction to it. Combination of two things. How governments have found it in their interest to shut down all personal liberty, to control every aspect of a person's life, to arrest them for walking outside of their homes, telling them they can't go to work, telling them that they have to do exactly what the government says. No freedom. And the government has taken control of all business and shut down most of them, making people completely dependent upon the government. And the government can only take care of them by creating the illusion of money, by destroying the value of the currency. That government response fundamentally changed our world. It put us into the era where the very things that Yahweh spoke of in the time of Jacob's troubles is possible. It wasn't imaginable for us prior to this. Our natural tendency to perceive that since yesterday was like today, tomorrow will be the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's the normalcy bias. That was shattered. For the first time in our lifetime, the first time in 4 generations, not only is today not like yesterday, and tomorrow will be so radically different. It was all done deliberately. And so for that reason, we need to understand how this event shapes the world that causes Yahweh to say, I am calling my people home now. You have very little time. The world is going to turn on you, and I'm the only one who can save you. You need to listen to me now. You need to come home. Things are going to get really nasty out there. And so that's why I've been so frantically working to try to get the 2 volumes of Coming Home ready to publish. They are now. To get my buddy Yoel to get them and observations put more prominently on the web. People need to know what condition the world is in and what this means for them. And this is a time when particularly Yehudim that are rational, that are open to the truth, that are not religious, they'll be open to Yah's message. I've never seen a time where more people are open to his message. I think, Kirk, as you shared the Dr. Yah passage from the Torah, that physicians were saying, oh my God, that is 3,500 years old, that instruction, and it's exactly what we ought to be doing now, what we should have done right at the beginning with this virus, and had we done it, it'd have been a non-event.
Well, I don't think they would go quite that far, but they were amazed at the clarity of it and and it bespeaks everything that they know this right to do. I mean, they just they don't know what to do with it, actually. They go, wow. It's kind of like,
I'm the one that said that if we had done that, the virus would have been no effect. But it's like when you tell someone that the 6 days of creation and 15 billion years are the exact same length of time relative to the observer.
Who's viewing?
And if somebody's jaw doesn't drop down and say, I want to know more, or they just pass it over as, okay, yawn. Now, at that point, person is interested in knowing God or not interested. This is the same thing. You read Dr. Yah's approach to pandemics, infectious disease, and if you're not impressed that he came up with this 3,500 years before science and physicians did, then I'm just sorry for you. I'm just sorry for you. Yeah.
What is there to grab? I mean, what can you grab somebody with if you don't grab them with those things? I mean, that should be if that's not an aha moment, I don't know what would be.
Yes.
I mean, it certainly was.
One of the things that I liked about it is that if you did what I do, which 6 days a week, sometimes 7, I don't consider this ordinary work, although it's what I do. I sit in this chair, and I translate, and I share insights derived from those translations. And I try to teach based upon those translations. And I do it on average 10 hours a day. And I've done it now for 18 years. And if you do that for that extensive a period of time, after a while, if you're constantly going where the words lead, you're going to begin to think like the author. And so my perspective is largely synced with Yah's. So as this virus first came out, I made some recommendations. My recommendations were exceedingly similar to what we have now found in the Torah. Mm-hmm. And we just ought not be surprised anymore that the whole purpose of the Torah is to provide a perspective by which, when you incorporate that guidance and you make judgments and you respond, that your direction, your conclusions, your response is directed by what he has shared. Yeah. It's the advantage that goes from knowing to understanding, it leads to this spot. So, Kirk, you've sent me your analysis. I'm very impressed now. You're with your typing ability and your emailing, and so I have this long email from you on Korah 13, 45, and 46, which I have shared in the last two programs dealing with the plague. And so I promised to turn the program over to you for you to be able to share what you learned.
Well, thank you, I think. The whole thing started with me, and I'll give one little comment before I begin. Then I'll read some of this stuff, and y'all jump in wherever you will, and being the active listeners that y'all are. But the one thing I did from the start was when Terry and I read Yada Yahweh, she turned to me on a particular occasion, and she said, "You're going to have to learn how to do this translating, because I don't want to be led down the road again by someone talking about what God says. We need to be able to prove it." And I agreed with that. I wasn't concerned that you weren't right on an awful lot of stuff, but I wanted to be able, if I was going to ever say something to someone else and share it, I want to know as much as I can know and be confident that what I'm saying I understood, rather than just repeated. Because they ask me
so the information you're sharing is coming from inside of you.
From my understanding.
You're representing what you know as opposed to what somebody else knows.
That's
huge
correct.
Difference.
That's correct.
Huge difference.
So that was the input of all of it. And then when I started calling into your show and you invited me to call in more and so forth, I wanted to really know each thing you were doing, and not to prove it so much, but just to analyze it and say, wow, that's okay. I see how we came to that point, because that helped me to be better. I'm not a JB, as good as JB on translating, but I do enjoy just digging out all the words and seeing what they mean and figure out why it fits here in what context. And JB and I have talked a whole lot about that kind of stuff as well on his version and some of the things that I do as well. Then it just became fun. I'm going through a pretty rough time right at the moment, and it was a great joy, Justin, when y'all sent the Korah 13, 45, and 46. I thought, boy, that is a winner. That is so cool. And I just started looking at it, and I said, the one thing I can honestly say, that Yahweh talks on a lot of levels. And even though the input here is to train your family on how to deal with a virus, obviously the clear intent of this translation, and your translation is absolutely right on the money for that. I did the same thing I always do. I took out one word, each one of these words, and I analyzed them to see, and I write down every meaning that's in the lexicons that I can find. Yeah. And then I say, well, and these words are so rich with meaning. It was. I said, wait a minute. This could also be something else or something more. And it is. Yeah. So what I said, and I acknowledged that, and I'll just move down a little bit further down to begin with. And I said, I began looking at each word and analyzing Towrah, and we find that the verb means to be struck by disease or plague. and it relates to the feminine noun, to saroth, meaning a mark, a human disease, a fungus, a mold, or even leprosy. But leprosy can also be a viral infection, and it's spread by nasal secretions and droplets that can affect the upper respiratory tract and associated with fever. Now I'm learning that it has more to do with the blood, but still, most viruses, you want to guard yourself against sneezing and that sort of thing. That's why they put the mask on them.
Mm-hmm. Most viruses enter the body through our respiratory system.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why people
the fact that the virus is specifically designed to attach to the lungs, and it does. Mm-hmm. The lungs are the source of oxygen for the blood, so there's this contact with the cells of the lungs and our bloodstream, and it's from the lungs that this virus infects the blood with the HIV and Ebola components of the virus. And so all of that is still correct, that it is the mask and the isolation of the sick people is specifically designed to constrain the virus so that those people are cured, separated from society as a whole, so society can function, and then they're brought back in. But it's still viruses spread via the respiratory system. Mm-hmm. This particular one, by the way, is airborne. I mean, it's aerosol. It moves from person to person in an airborne fashion, and that 6 feet is utter nonsense. It can travel up to 20 to 25 feet with a cough or a sneeze. So, that the distancing is much greater than you might think.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, if you sneeze, I know it go all across the room, so it would stand to reason that it would be a little bit more than 6 feet. Mm-hmm. But regardless, so I went on to say let's consider the pictographs, because I like to look at those and see what's there. And it's a Dowd and a Roshan and a yin that form the word that means to infect and taint, to contaminate with something that affects quality, character, or conditions unfavorably, and with the key word being character. It also refers to infected clothes. And now, their infected clothes can be religious robes. It's just the obvious. So I made a note of
it's so
that.
interesting that I happen to think that you're right, that God is talking about practically within the community of Israel when a virus occurs and people are infected. This is what you do: put a mask on the infected individual. Isolate that individual so they're outside of the home. But one of the things was opening up their apparel. And the opening up of their apparel is specifically designed for this purpose, which is he wants the religious person to be exposed, naked, because this prophecy or this explanation in the Torah isn't just about infections within Israel at the time. It's about future infections in Israel, like, for example, right now with the coronavirus. But it's also symbolic of religion and politics, which is the biggest, most deadly aspect of this virus. And so the opening up the clothing is exposing the politician and the religious leader.
Good call. Yeah. And it also means an infected building. Well, that's a nice church. They got them all over Israel. Makes it a sickening place. And this obviously, I went on to say, this obviously depicts a person laying in a snare to hunt its prey, which is the way they would describe the Benjamites, the way they describe the most famous Benjamite. He's a wolf. So they sit and wait. Now, the Rosh indicates an observing. Someone who is observing, but what? Well, man's view or man's perspective, obviously not Yah's. The Rosh and the Ain is a two-letter root that describes one who is dysfunctional, abnormal, afflicted, as well as ill. And we could be looking at a man plague just as well as we could be looking at an airborne virus in this regard. The Dowd, the Rosh, and the Ain are Also, by the way, every now and then I check the numbers out. They don't always apply, at least, or I'm not able to catch the drift as well. But when you see a real obvious one, those add up to a 360, and that's the circle like the sun on our clocks is the 360-degree view, divisible by 6, man's number, obviously without the 1.
And draw a circle around, enclose the infected person. Isolate the infected person, which is specifically what the instruction says.
Wow, that's very good.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, if you like the sun too, guess what the most deadly thing is to this virus?
The sun, of course.
UV radiation.
Sunlight.
That's why they're
sunlight.
pushing vitamin D3. By the way,
that is correct.
Comes up a lot. Yeah,
that is correct.
Yep.
Yes, so, exactly. I did too. I'm taking it.
Yeah. So nagah is the next word, or approximate, and it's a masculine noun meaning an infection or a plague. And it's the same word used in Bereshit 12:17, which is described the plague that Yah visits on the house of Pharaoh. And it's good to look at the first times they use a use of a word. It gives you a little insight on what it means as well. So now we must consider that we're talking about a viral disease, a religion, and even perhaps the plague from the divine. The word is used interchangeably in all those circumstances. Nagah is also defined as a stroke, and that would be a metaphor of a disease of chastisement, or perhaps a stroke of a poison pen of Paul, or perhaps the Talmud or the Quran. Nagah is its verb and can mean to be stricken, touched, harmed, defeated in battle, brought to the ground, stricken by sickness. And it can be a striking of a clock as in time, and also brought down in the day as to be brought down in that day, which, of course, when I say Yom and that day, I'm usually thinking it's called Yom Kippurim. Nagah allows us to translate it as a mark on the body from a disease, or a mark or the mark of the beast. Now, I'm not saying all these are true. I'm just saying when I see these things, I start connecting little dots and say, could it be that, and explore it as much as I can. But we do know that as we approach 2033, we'll find the vast preponderance of people accepting the plague of death by using the identifying mark, if those as we find in those prophecies.
You want to hear something interesting? Let me share something with you. I forgot to share this earlier, and it plays right into this. I mentioned remdesivir.
Yes.
That the only treatment therapeutic is actually working for the coronavirus. It's remdesivir. Was developed to combat Ebola. It is manufactured by an American company. The name of the American company is Gilead. Now, Gilead means the mount of the witness in Hebrew. Oh, yeah. They named it Gilead because of the balm of Gilead. The balm of Gilead is mentioned in Bereshit 37:28, Ezekiel 27:17, Bereshit 43:11, Yirmiyah 8:22, Yirmiyah 46:11, 51:8. So, what do you think the Hebrew word is for balm of the mount of the witness? Well, the Hebrew word for it, now this company invented a remedy, a therapeutic for Ebola. Ebola is a blood disease, correct? The word is sori. Sori in Hebrew means blood, bleed, running of blood, or blood in one's veins. Wow. So the balm of Gilead is a blood-related balm that deals with our bloodstream. And that's mentioned 10 times in the Torah. And here's this company, and they created an Ebola therapeutic that deals with the Ebola virus, and now that is the one most effective therapeutic for the coronavirus, and it was named after the balm of Gilead, which is the bloodstream balm or therapeutic from the Mount of the Witness. How about them apples?
I love this stuff.
Do you think that he ought I'll show them. They'll find this.
Yeah. Well, he said the Torah is complete, really lacking nothing. Everything you want to know, if you go there, you'll find it. So, I mean, I would think that would make everybody digging away. Come on. This is just so cool. I mean, he's telling you everything you need to know, so why not take him in his word? So.
And all this passage that you're analyzing is from what we typically consider the Torah. The Torah is not limited to the first 5 books. It's really clear by Yah's use of the word Torah that the word, which means source of teaching, guidance, instruction, and direction, is the totality of his revelation. And so the prophets and the Torah are a collective unit. They're just one. All Torah is prophetic because it has Yah's signature. And the Torah runs through all the prophets. So the only thing that is distinct from the Torah and prophets, which is one, that's all of the Hebrew revelation, the only thing that is distinct is still Torah and prophets, but it's called the Mizmor or Psalms. But even the Mizmor and Psalms are Torah, and they're prophetic. So when we say Torah, we're not just talking about the 5 books. We're talking about the totality of Yahweh's prophetic revelation from Bereshit to Genesis all the way to Malachi.
Yeah.
Torah lowercase t, not Torah capital T. Capital T refers to the 5 books. Lowercase is all of it. It's all teaching.
Yeah. Well, it stands to reason. I mean, you don't send a prophet over there not to teach somebody something, and those not writing so you won't learn, and understand. So it's all the same. For educational. So then I went on to say that now we come to beged, his garment, and this word also means treachery, which is an odd meaning for a virus. I wouldn't think of a virus as being treacherous. It doesn't have
the response to it has been.
Well, yeah. Indeed it has.
The virus has no mind of its own. It can't even replicate itself independently. No. There's even questions as to whether a virus is alive or not. And by the typical definitions, it's not alive. So it has no brain. It has no conscience. It can't be treacherous. But man's response to it has been.
Yes, absolutely. What you were reading is so sickening. I mean, it's just it's made me almost ill thinking about it. It's just, God dang,
And by the way, I'm not even sharing the half of it. If you knew what Leah had found in her research, and she has read all of these research papers and studied all the reports out of China, spending 10, 12 hours a day on it, and I didn't even share the 1% of it.
Yeah. Wow. That just bless her heart. Yeah. Oh, well, I went on to say that the obvious intent is to convey garment, but it's also been used as filthy clothes of a diseased individual. And in my mind, can't help but envision holy robes or the raiments of the royal houses. The politicians, the kings, the dictators. The verb begad means to act and deal treacherously and deceitfully or to be betrayed. And that's not the virus. That's when you look at those meanings, and obviously I was talking about something else, the religion, politics, and so forth. So reviewing the 2 letter roots, So reviewing the 2 letter roots, the bet and the gimel, means spoil, to despise, to divide, and booty. Therefore, a house attacked. Beged is an act of treachery, and it's written Bet, Gimel, Delete. I'm sorry, I don't have the little letters figured out how to put them in yet, but we're working on it. Jackie's helping me to figure out how to do that, so that'll come later. But in the pictographs, one sees a foot walking away from the Pesach door and towards the house, and that is a decidedly a negative concept, a negative word. So the next key word was param, pei rosh.
Yeah, it's the foot is actually walking away from the house and from the doorway. Yeah. So that's a bad thing.
That is as negative as you can get.
So and that's interesting that the letters do line up that way, and you can actually read things. So once again, it's another layer that Yah has offered us to try to figure out as much as we can about what he's saying. The pei rosh mem, the param, is it means to tear or to rip his clothes, or to tear or to rip. And I was thinking like his clothes because we were just talking about that a minute ago. One is normal function, and the other is violent in nature. Leah pointed out, and I'm talking about Miss L again, she pointed out to Terry and I when we were visiting that one time how packaging in America takes a great deal of violence to open. And I haven't thought
clam
about
packs.
It almost makes you a violent.
Every time I get a clam pack, I curse the inventor of it. Of course, it's designed for anti-theft. Because such a substantial amount of retail merchandise is subject to five-finger discount. So it was designed to make things hard to steal.
A retail store is lucky if they only have 5% shrinkage,
Right.
And it's amazing what kind of culture do we have that we have to protect everything so much like that.
Yes.
Well, in any case, the verse states to let his head alone. Maybe it's because of the sunshine on his head. I wasn't exactly sure why that was in there. What did you say about that? Where it really doesn't say to cover his head, does it?
No, it says cover the mouth.
That's what I mean. But
the fabric has to be put over the mouth, and it specifically it talks about the nose and lip area.
Yeah, so I got to that, but I was just wondering why not to cover his head unless you just want the sunshine to get in through.
No, what it says is that you need to avoid their head because part of the instruction is avoid the head. Well, you got to avoid the head because that's where the mouth and the nose and the sneezing and the breathing out of the pathogen is. So you avoid the head.
But I got the rest of it right. Cover his mouth, a taw. What spews from his mouth is poisonous to the rest of us. A taw, turn him aside, grasp firmly, and wrap something up tightly. It's written in the ayin, thet, and the hay. And this really conveys, see the mark on the man in its simplest form. And we can refer to the root ayin and thet, which implies to see and contain. That is equally comfortable in either scenario. However, it's also the meaning of a stylus and a writing stick or implement. So we have a sick individual or a promoter of deadly disease through writing. So you could draw those conclusions, I think, fairly honestly. Safan means mustache, mouth, and lips. From safa, speech, lips, language, babbling. I thought that was interesting. Words and talk, used as a verb to sweep or snatch away, like a Benjamite wolf, to destroy, to perish, and consume. Symbolically written with a shemak, a fence that separates the pieces. Pei, words both nourishing or deadly, and the hay, the upright, engaged one. So the root shemak pei means to gather in a scroll or a written document. So you can draw some conclusions there as well. And then it says, proclaim, kara, call out to the world with a loud shout. The quaf, the rosh, the aleph, means to raise one's voice and to speak loudly with urgency, even to call out by name. The two-letter root, quaf, rosh, means to gather the individuals. And that's kind of the context of what we do, and that's what you're telling people. But you can have two sides. You can gather the sick people and set them aside, and you can be calling out to the healthy ones on what to do. So,
which is exactly what he tells them. He says, take the sick and send them away from their homes, away from the community. And then he gives specific instructions on the priests, which would be like the physicians of today. And he tells them specifically how to deal with them, including how to wash their clothing and them in antifungal, antiviral chemicals.
Yeah.
He even tells them how the quarantine period, and the quarantine period is 7 days asymptomatic, 14 days if symptomatic.
That was amazing. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
But I did have one doctor say, really? I said, yeah, really. That's what he says.
Really?
We'll look it up. In the context here, it is to proclaim publicly that this man is tame, or tameh, unclean and defiled, spelled with a tet, min, and an aleph, which also conveys morally impure or physically filthy. So it could be either scenario there applied to which you're talking about. This is not an either-or scenario, and I'm thrilled with I gave you a plug here. I mean, I am thrilled with the translation of CW. This may have been a little or no relevance, but it just it's packed with so many multi-level words. It's just hard not to say that what else is here, the way I approach each one of these things anyway. And so, anyway, that is what I seem to enjoy, and I'm always prepared to make the mistakes and learn from them. So it doesn't matter if I get some of these wrong. I think you ought to put them down anyway if you're doing it yourself, and see what you can make of it. It's just a fun exercise. So to summarize verse 45, we are told how to deal with the infected, and to find that it is the same process whether we are dealing with a viral or a religion. Now let me say something real quick. So many shows I was privileged to do with you, and I cannot tell you how many times you said the key to containing Islam.
Yes.
Contain them, separate them, leave them alone, don't feed them, don't give
quarantine.
them stuff. If they want to fight, let them kill each other.
Quarantine them.
Don't bring them to Europe.
Yes. Don't send your people there to try to beat them up. Don't do business with them and trade money for weapons and quarantine them. Don't allow them into your country so they don't infect you and they keep the infection there. The answer for Islam happened to be exactly what Dr. Yah prescribed in the Torah.
Yeah. So,
in fact, if you could put a cloth over their mouth and muzzle their speech, that would also be a really good idea.
That would be extremely helpful. Oh, gosh, it's the same thing. This is a plague is a plague is a plague, right?
Yes. Let me read this passage, just so that people have a chance to hear it again. It says, then the person infected with a contagious disease who is suffering from the pandemic, his clothing should be on his own volition split such that it is easily opened. His head, specifically his eyes, nose, and mouth, should be avoided. Then upon his nose and lips, he should cover it with a piece of cloth, and then announce, consider me unclean and socially contaminated and infected. All of the days of the infectious plague that is associated with him, he shall continue to be considered extremely unclean and infected. He must be separated and distanced from others. He should consistently stay away from the residences and public places associated with the population centers of his household and settlements. Korah Invitations, Leviticus 13, 45, and 46. And as I said, immediately thereafter, Yahowah describes the 7 to 14-day quarantine period for those infected individuals, and then specifically what their clothing and surroundings should be washed down with. that today have proven to have antifungal, antiviral, and antibacteria qualities.
Yeah. Ain't it amazing?
It is truly breathtaking and amazing.
The world's gone nuts, and we're sitting here going, well, Yahweh said just to wash your hands, cover your mouth, move them out of town, separate them from the herd, and leave us alone to work so we can produce enough food so we can feed the poor sucker. I mean,
yeah. The next, in fact, I would love to go through Psalm 118.
Keep them away for an extra 7 days.
That's right. That's exactly what the scientists are telling us now. Let me read Psalm 118:25 because it's the first thing that I translated after translating that Torah passage. It reads, "Rescue and save us, Yahweh. We ardently and lovingly request. Out of a sense of urgency, please, Yahweh, we emphatically ask, as this is our passionate response and our enthusiastic reply. Choose to give us the means to succeed, fulfilling our desire to prosper and thrive. Please." Boy, we should have that urgency today, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Rescue and save us, Yahweh. We ardently and lovingly request. Out of a sense of urgency, please, Yahweh. We emphatically ask, as this is our passionate response and enthusiastic reply, choose to give us the means to succeed, fulfilling our desire to prosper and thrive. Please. That's followed by, blessed is the one who comes in the name of Yahweh. We lovingly greet and bless you by your name from the family of Yahweh. Yahweh is God. He has and will shine his light upon us. Vow to be bound by choosing to join in during the festival feast with the branch, extending as a witness to the shofar trumpet of brilliant light of the altar. The branch of the festival feast is with those who are bound by the teaching instruction as an eternal witness to the shofar trumpet of the brilliant light. You are my God. I admit to knowing you by acknowledging your attributes. My God, I will rise with you. Choose of your own volition to acknowledge, knowing and appreciating Yahweh. For indeed, he is generous and good. For the express reason, his enduring love, unfailing kindness, and genuine mercy are everlasting. And thus ends the 118th Mizmor.
Wow.
One of the great thrills of my life was when we translated Yahowah, Isaiah 9, and translated it in the context of Yahowah 8, which is breathtaking in its scope of history, past, present, and future. And we found that the child who was born, the son who was given to us, is Dowd. And it should not have been a surprise that it was Dowd, because there's only one name written in the prophecy. Dowd's. And only one person actually fulfilled everything that's written in the prophecy. And so what Christians did is they expressly changed the terminology such that it would seem to apply to their Jesus. You know, it doesn't say anything close to what's in the English translations. And when we went through that the first time, when we realized for the first time that The Christian Jesus, Yahusha, is the Son of Man, not the Son of God. Dowd is the Son of God. Yahusha never claimed to be the Messiah because he was never anointed. Dowd is the Messiah. Dowd is the King of Kings. And it's Dowd who is coming back with Yahweh, not Yahusha. Dowd is the shepherd, Yahusha is the lamb. Once we came to realize that, this whole change of paradigm and perspective on who Yahweh is working through and with, and how he's trying to communicate with us, and who is calling us home, and who's going to greet us when we arrive, changed profoundly. It was
the most remarkable thing I've ever heard.
Oh, well,
really?
It was so contrary to everything the world has been told. It so guts every aspect of Christianity. And yet it was like exposing and condemning
because
Paul.
The evidence is just so obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
yeah.
It's the same thing. It's once you realize just how obvious it is that Paul is a false prophet and a liar, you wonder, how in the world was I fooled by this? And then when you realize that Yahusha is nothing more and nothing less than the Passover lamb, that's a lot, and it is enough. But when it comes to the Passover lamb, we don't want to follow the Passover lamb. We don't want to listen to the Passover lamb. We want to appreciate the sacrifice of the Passover lamb.
Correct.
We want to follow the shepherd.
Yes.
We want to listen to the shepherd. I had the opportunity, and maybe we'll do this next week, to retranslate the Mizmor 22, which is the one that Yahusha cited to explain what was happening on during the fulfillment of Pesach. And the truth of the matter is, very little of the 22nd Mizmor is even about Yahusha's sacrifice. There's some, it's prophetic, and you can actually picture yourself there. But most of it is about Yahweh. And then afterwards, I did the 23rd Psalm. And first thing I did is to say, why did Dowd call Yahweh his shepherd? And we'll share what it is about sheep that God must really like to present himself as not only one of them, but as leading them. And so it's the 22nd Mizmor, or the 23rd Mizmor, is enough to bring you to tears when you think of what it actually says and how different what it says is than what we've been led to believe. Just as is the 22nd Mizmor, on how it opens by explaining the Pesach sacrifice, but very quickly goes to, this is Yahweh doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share with you when we get into it too.
It's more about matzah than Pesach, really.
Yeah, I think the 88th gets more into matzah.
Okay, maybe I had
the 22nd. Yeah, I think so. The 22nd really does. It does get into matzah. There's no question about it, and speaks of Bokorim. It's a witness to those 3 days, but it does have on the Yahusha part of it. It has more to say about Pesach, and we're going to have to deal with, why is Yahusha's name not mentioned? Why isn't it ever mentioned? And we're going to get into, whose soul really was it?
Yeah, that's interesting there.
And what does that soul represent? How does our soul, and being the repository of everything that is important to us, our memories, our inclinations, our aptitudes, our personalities. So our soul represents our very life, our existence. Well, Yahweh tells us that he has a soul. Yeah. But Yahweh's soul isn't to Yahweh like our soul is to him. Yahweh's soul is more like a probe that he can dispatch when he wants to relate to humans in human form. It's like we put a spacecraft out there with a probe that we can experience what it's like to be in proximity of Jupiter when we couldn't survive there. And we're going to talk about what the nature of that soul was. I gave it a lot of thought, and I think you don't have to agree, because God doesn't tell us the nature of the soul. We really have to extrapolate from what He does tell us. But I'll share some things that I think are really interesting that will be helpful on what that soul was and what it meant to Yahweh and why Yahweh used that soul and who really is Yosha as the Pesach lamb.
Have you already done this?
Have I already done it?
Yeah.
Yes. No, I've already done it. I've in fact, that's why we're looking for Alan Porter, as he's the person that took these books and made them possible for us to buy them at Amazon. I've now completed volumes 1 and volumes 2 of Coming Home in Our Time, and came up with a different format so they can be printed with larger print and be more easily read. And we want to get them printed, and my commitment was to get through the 22nd and 23rd Mizmor by the time that we were ready to print the first volumes of Coming Home in Our Time, and that's what I did. I think it's the 13th chapter of Volume 2, and so those volumes are now ready to print, and it's the last thing that I have written. I found it to be very moving, and I hope you will too. It's the chapter that follows Dr. Yah. So right now we're commenting the 118th Psalm is in Dr. Yah, and the passage that we talked about from the Torah on how do you deal with an infectious disease is also in Dr. Yah. I think it's the 12th chapter of Volume 2 of Coming Home, and a child is born. I think actually it's the last chapter of it is followed by a child is born, and then there's the shepherd speaks about the lamb, and that's the final chapter of Volume 2. And so yes, it's been translated, it's ready to go. I've begun to share it. I think it's been edited now, and if ever there was a time when I wanted Yah's people to read it, it's now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll dispense with this because they can read the other thing. It basically is just me looking at these words and saying, "Boy, you can see all the religion in there you want." So he is definitely talking about 2, and then at the very end, I put some numbers down which are probably won't be valid in another week, but it was interesting. I will add this one thing. It was interesting where the virus hit the most, and that was on the what I call the 3 Babylons. But if nothing else, they certainly hit the Europe, which is most Christian religious. It obviously hit the Middle East on the most associated with the old Babylon. And I think I put, as far as the United States, we are the biggest culprit. We are the ones who supply everything to the Muslims to destroy the world. We're the global communications network that's spewing out, "Come to Jesus."
If you look at the infection rates and death rates on the coronavirus, what you find is the countries that are most responsible for what happened to Israel in World War II, and what the countries most responsible for arming Israel's enemies for World War III. Those are the countries.
Yeah, I noticed you right away. You look at there. He's thumping them on the head, saying, "Okay, I'll give you a little touch. I'll give you a little touch now. If you don't get paid heed, it's going to come down harder." And also,
it's also the countries that the Jews need to leave. The Jews need to leave to come home.
Yeah. So all in all, that's and they'll have it all cleaned up. And maybe James can put it on his website if somebody wants to read it. There it is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
No.
Yeah, I'll leave you with one other thought, fellas, is that when you do have a chance, it's actually in the end of the Dr. Yah chapter. I returned because of the reference to that which emerges out of the root of Yishai, Jesse. I returned to Yashaya 11. And I returned to it because I'm trying to cover some of the more interesting prophecies about Dowd. And Yashaya 11 happens to be the one that speaks about an insignificant implement known as a choder that's going to be extended. I want you guys to read it. I don't even, ever since I've done the translation, I've just been stammering. I can't even go back and do my read-through of it. I had no idea as to really how far it went. I had previously just been fascinated that Yahweh spoke this choder in relationship to what would stand out and be noticed coming from Dowd. And what it says is as earth-shattering as the effects of the coronavirus. If you're just dealing with what it means to be one of God's chosen people and what God is offering and expecting in return, it's darn near as profound as the impact of the coronavirus. So take a read of it and let me know what you think. I don't know if we should do a program on it or not, or just let it be known among us and the people stumble into it and read it, fine. Because it's really, really extraordinarily intense. So I think it begins right around page 50 of the Dr. Yah chapter in the new printed format.
Okay.
All right, fellas. I enjoyed this with you. I'm glad that we're part of Yah's family. We have the ultimate health insurance, life insurance, if you will. We call it life assurance.
Life assurance. Yeah, that's good.
So we are in not only in good hands, but we're in a time where what we know is vitally important. And it's incumbent upon us to do as Dowd did. He committed his life to sharing what he knew about God, to writing it down and acknowledging. He says it over and over again, that he had vowed and that he is committed to sharing what he came to know about God. And that is our responsibility as well. And if ever was a time that we ought to honor that responsibility on behalf of all of the souls that could spend eternity with Yahweh and Shamayim as a result, we will have a lifetime to celebrate. We'll have eternity to celebrate with them. And the richer the experience is going to be. So this is the time for us to be focused on doing everything we can to extend and share this message. Happy Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
Best to you and your family.
See you next week.
Good night. And good night.
Take care. Night.